Hey guys, this is going to be part one of my lecture videos on reliability and validity. So for this module, we are going to work with two objectives. So we're going to learn what reliability and validity are and why they are important. That'll be split over two videos. And then the last video will cover the basic measurement scales. So make sure you watch all three. So this chapter is kind of different because we're working with measuring our dependent variable. So it's kind of a rapid review for what we've covered so far. The dependent variable is what we are measuring. We talked about in module 1 how it has to be a number, and it's something that we are measuring as an outcome. So the easiest way to remember that is that it depends on or is impacted by the independent variable. So the independent variable is the treatment. That's where we get our groups. So with this module, we're kind of going to set aside the independent variable for a minute and really focus on the dependent variable, because this is really important to see how we are measuring what we want as our outcome. So for example, if we are looking at the effect of different reading programs on a comprehension score, the independent variable is the reading program. That's our treatment. The dependent variable is the actual score on the reading comprehension test. So we're going to focus on that dependent variable for this module. So this lecture video is going to focus on reliability. So reliability is consistency. That's the key word you want to take away with reliability. So whatever you are using, it's a test or some kind of measurement tool, does it measure it consistently? So think about like a stopwatch. If you're going to measure the time it takes somebody to run a mile, you need a stopwatch that is reliable, that will give a consistent measure of that time. Another example that is kind of common is personality type tests. So if someone takes the Myers-Briggs, for example, I'm an ISTJ. I take it today, and then I take it 6 months from now. I'll probably get the same result because the Myers-Briggs personality test is a very reliable measure. It does what it measures is personality, and it does that consistently. So there's 4 types of reliability that we'll talk about today. The first is called test-retest reliability. The second is parallel forms. Third is internal consistency. And the last is inter-rater. And I'm going to cover these kind of fast. So if you have questions, make sure to either email me or post in the discussion boards. Okay, so test-retest. This is when you want to know if a test is reliable over time. Now, time is defined by the researcher. It could be 20 minutes. It could be 6 months. It could be 2 years. The time is not set. The researcher decides the time. So what we do is to determine if a test is reliable for test-retest, we look at the scores from the first time the person takes the test and then the second time the person takes the test. Now there's that's the most basic ones. So think of a pre-test, post-test, kind of like we had in one of the articles from the last module for homework. So if we establish test-retest reliability, an example of what we can say is the Bonzo test of identity formation for adolescents is reliable over time. So that's an example of what we can say once we have established that what we're using is consistent over time. Now, a different type is called parallel forms. So you've probably, if you've taken a seated class in the biology department at OTC, you've probably seen this before. So this is when you want to know if different forms of a test are equal to each other. So in the biology classes, half the class will get form A, half the class will get form B, but everybody takes the test one time. So with test-retest, we're taking the same test 2 or more times. Parallel forms, we're taking 2 different versions of the test one time. So what we do here is we correlate the scores from form A, for example, with the scores on form B for the same test, but it's not the exact same test, but it does cover the same content or material. So what we can say when we're done is, for example, 2 forms of the regular guy test are equivalent to one another and have shown parallel forms reliability. Now, internal consistency is a little different. So test-retest and parallel forms deal with total scores. Internal consistency is when you look at the individual items within a test. So this one's a little different than the first two. So what we do with this one is we take the individual items on the test and you see how they are related to each other. This is done with, it's called a coefficient alpha, is the way to measure the correlation between the items. So what we can say is, an example of what we can say is all the items on a test of creativity are related to each other. So we're looking at the individual items on the test instead of the total test score. Now, the last type of reliability is called inter-rater reliability. This one is my favorite because it's so fun. So this is when you want to know whether there is consistency among different people who score the same test. So with the first three, we've looked at sort of very objective measures on a test or scores or on items within a test. This is a little more subjective. So think about like American Idol. When the performers are on American Idol and the judges give them a score, that is a type of inter-rater reliability. Same thing with like the Olympics. With the Winter Olympics, they have ice skating or figure skating. So they'll perform the figure skating routine. The judges will give them a score. And what is the consistency among the different judges who have seen that same performance? So to make this kind of a number, we can examine the percentage of times that, for example, two different raters agree. So for example, the inter-rater reliability for best dressed football player judging was 85%, indicating a high degree of agreement between the judges. So that's just one example of that. So I'm going to end here and pick up with validity. Make sure you watch the next video over it.